Hello and welcome, my name is Disaster, this is Battlefield 1, and today we'll be doing a map guide for Prise de Tahure, the final map in the They Shall Not Pass DLC. At this point, a quick disclaimer, I am not French, please do apologize the butchering of the map name in the upcoming video. With that being said, in today's video, we'll be covering the layout and pathing of the map, inventory and vehicular combat, and of course, finally and most importantly, the winning strategy. Starting off as we always do with, of course, the layout of the map. Now generally the map is non-linear, unlike most maps in Battlefield 1 which are either linear or at least semi-linear. In this case actually this map is circular if you so will. We have two dummy flags, two flanking flags for the lack of a better term, and one central flag. So when it comes to the dummy flags A and D, unlike most other maps in Battlefield 1, they are actually within reach of combat and do see a lot more combat, at least in my personal experience, than most of the other dummy flags do in Battlefield 1. To note about these flags is the following. First of all, as everything else on this map, generally it's quite close quarter orientated. However, A and E, especially A, are very close quarter orientated, much more for example than maybe the central C flag or even flag D in certain areas of the map, more in line with what we have on B. More on those points of course later in the video. Furthermore, if you trap a team in their spawn or even take their dummy flag and they don't have any other flags, on this map actually it can be very difficult to get out of your spawn. So it is a valid strategy to spawn camp your enemy in their base. This close proximity of the enemy spawn to this first dummy flag, however, also means that if you capture this flag and you have an opponent which is aware of this or cares about this, they have a relatively easy time deploying relatively close to the flag to take it back quite quickly if the necessary defense for it isn't provided. When it comes to the flanking flags B and D, these in my opinion are the most influential in the game, and that's because they aren't visited enough by the losing team usually. These are the flags that really make the difference, because usually in most scenarios a team will hold on to their dummy flag for the majority of the game if they're semi-competent. If they can then on top of that either hold one of the side flanking flags and of course the central flag, or even better the two flanking flags, and attack the central flags with some sort of pincer movement, they've essentially won the game. They've got 3 out of 5 of the available flags and have a better ticket gain than the other team. When it comes to travel times to those flags, generally B is the more accessible in my opinion. Spawning in as the French, quickly taking E, you are relatively quickly also on B, and B is closer to the central flag C, where eventually everybody will end up on this map, because as we will later discover, most paths on this map actually lead to the central flag on C. That's not to say that D is completely out of the way or extremely difficult to get to, but you do notice that teams tend to more likely go for B, especially once they capture the central objective if both D and B are available, because B simply is closer and as such sees a little bit more action in the course of any given conquest match. When it comes then to that central C flag, in my opinion it's the trap essentially for any team. Many teams focus on just capturing and holding the C flag in the center of the map and maybe their dummy flag. That is how you essentially lose. While it's important to always go for any flag you can take, if the resistance on the flag is too great, if the defending capability of the team on there is too numerous, then you need to go for another flag. In essence, when it comes to conquest in Battlefield 1, you really don't want to be spending too much time fighting other enemies, unless you're doing so in a manner that is actually holding up an equal proportion of their team than it is taking you to hold up them, or an even greater number of their players, essentially starving their team of players on other objectives. That however isn't usually the case. Usually it's just stubborn players zerging all onto the same objective. As such, while C is a great point to take, especially in passing while traveling between B to E or B to D, and of course vice versa from D to B, it isn't really a flag I generally go for as primary objective unless I know it is relatively non-contested and is an easy cap for my team. Further to note about C is that while it is a large area with plentiful cover on the ground level, there are 3 relatively powerful overlooking positions which can be used to fire down AT rocket guns or by keen snipers to take out targets. They are located on the northern, eastern and western side of the plaza which makes up the C objective, however all more towards the north of the map, towards the B objective. As such, the French have a little bit of an advantage getting to those, but still, the Germans nevertheless have a relatively easy time getting to that western position of power. Great place to be using, as said, AT rocket guns or the Martini Henry if you're looking for some sniper kills. Don't really care to share how many times I've actually gotten sniped from those positions of powers by the Martini Henry. Another thing to note about the C flag is that coming up from D, there's an excellent bit of cover, as well as coming from the route between B and A, that relatively western, northwestern route. There's also that crater there. Great cover there as well. And of course, the Flame Trooper spawns on the C objective, the only elite class on this map. In my opinion, only of limited use, at least in my experience. Every time I pick it up, I just instantly get charged by an enemy and really can't even get off more than 1 or 2 kills. My personal experience, you may have more luck. If you're looking for the elite class, that's where to find it. We move on then from the general layout of the map to pathing, which is a little bit more complicated on this map, or depending how you see it, not complicated at all, because really there's not too much to say. There's not a set route, set flanks. This is the beauty of this map. There is a lot more leeway in where you can travel without just being a dead open map, which leaves you vulnerable to camping bipods and snipers. You can move through this map tactically, consistently going for flanks, consistently anticipating where your enemy possibly could come from, and knowing that you only really have to pay attention to so many directions, nevertheless without the map getting very choke pointy, which is what makes great infantry combat, and further is enhanced by the excellent work DICE has done on cover on this map. Truly, in my opinion, the only map where DICE has put in the necessary effort to put proper cover on this map. And to some of you, this may seem like an arbitrary criticism. This is a close quarter orientated map. That's why there's so much cover. But look at a map like Amiens. For a matter of fact, even look at a map like Argonne Forest or Fort de Vaux. All close quarter orientated maps with relatively little cover if you think about it. Argonne Forest here, thanks to its terrain, makes up for that. The other two don't. It's a corridor shooter essentially, and especially in the case of Amiens, this means that actually close quarter orientated combat is usually very sporadic, very chaotic, and there's a lot of bullshit sniping, tank camping, and other kind of unsavory combat going on Amiens, as already discussed in my last map guide. And that's why pathing on this map is essentially down to you. Once you get a little bit of practice, you will know that the ring road is a great way to essentially get around the map. It's of course that way you can get from A to D to E to B, and it's always a great kind of orientation to take when looking as to which flag to take next. It is, however, one of the more open areas of the map, so if you're going to find snipers other than on the aforementioned power positions of height on C, that's where you're going to find those snipers. Having talked about pathing, this leads in nicely, of course, to infantry combat, and my enthusiasm for the cover placement and the availability of cover in this map, and nevertheless clear pathing and not open, chaotic nature, really carries over into this segment. In my opinion, of all the Conquest maps in Battlefield 1, this is the best to play as infantry player, unless you are a big fan of lots of long-range engagements. I, for my part, certainly am not. There's plenty of sniping to be had on any map and pretty much any game mode in Battlefield 1, where you need a little bit more of medium range and close quarters. And as such, obviously, the best class for this map, without doubt, is the Assault class with its Automatico, with its shotguns. It is as such also an absolute Automatico hell on PC. I can imagine things in the Assault class are a little bit more balanced when it comes to consoles, because the Hellriegel seems to be a little bit more popular over there. Good for you guys, you're lucky. However, the Assault class is by far not the only class you can play on this map. It may initially seem so. The longer you play the map, however, the more you realize that a large variety of medic and support weapons, and in certain areas and situations of the map, also the close quarter orientated scout rifles such as the SMLE, the Martini Henry, and of course the Gewehr M95, find their use, find their applicable engagement distances. I'd like to, however, especially take out the medic class here, because in my opinion, it's really still the best class to run this map, despite the obvious power that running around with an Automatico or Hellriegel or a shotgun holds on this map, and those are all very valid and very efficient choices for this map, as gameplay in today's video, past videos, and future videos will be plenty proof of. The medic class, if you're going for KD and helping your team, is still the best choice. I, for my part, have my best games with the autoloading 8.35 marksman with a little bit of teamwork. Me and my friend were both playing the autoloading 8.35, just the two of us over comms, doing a bit of revives. We were absolutely destroying the enemy team round after round, getting accused of hacks in the chat and going something on a 5, 6, 7 infantry KD, top of the scoreboard, of course, and that's without ever having touched vehicles in that given match. The power of the autoloading 8.35 on this map is unmatched in the medic class, in my personal opinion. We move on, of course, from the infantry combat to the vehicular combat, and there's a number of similarities when it comes to vehicular combat between this map and Amiens. First of all, the same tanks shine on this map as they do on Amiens. As such, the light tank, both in its flanker and support variant, are excellent for the solo player, and if you've got plentiful players that are willing to get into your tank, the heavy tank, both in the breakthrough and of course the flame variant, as well as the assault tank in multiple variants available there, is an excellent choice. To note here, however, I would never push onto the C objective. That is just leaving you too vulnerable to the huge amount of assault players that are on this map. For a matter of fact, in my opinion, you need to be very careful as vehicle player on this map, because the infantry to vehicle balance is more towards the infantry's favor than on most other maps in Battlefield 1. Not only because of the more close quarter nature of the map, the higher number of flanking routes, the higher amount of cover, but also because of the higher number of assaults likely on the enemy team, because once more of the close quarter nature of the map. As such, if you want to play tank effectively, stick to the ring road, as I like to call it. Stick to the objectives A, D, E, and B, essentially the flanking objectives and of course the dummy flags. There you can be very effective as tank. There you can make a real difference. Taking one of those flanking objectives, preventing a flank onto your dummy objective and holding it is doing a great service to your team, because of course when only 5 flags, holding one single flag with just a couple of infantry players and one tank is already tipping the balance massively in your favor of your team. Another thing to note here for those wishing to take out tanks is not only is it easy to sneak up with them with dynamite or of course AT grenades, AT rocket guns can be used very effectively from the ledges provided, from the cover provided, and of course the trenches that run across numerous of the objectives on this map, namely of course B, C, D, and A. But also you can make use of mines on these maps because they can be hidden relatively well in the often uneven ground and of course on edges of the trenches, taking out tanks relatively efficiently. The only problem with those of you looking to take out multiple tanks in a round is that there is only of course one tank per team. Last but not least, then we come to strategy, and maybe to some of you guys' surprise, there's no clear strategy to outline on this map, in my opinion. Certainly not as clear as it was, for example, for Amiens or even Empire's Edge, where there was clearly, in my opinion, 1 or 2 strategies which will lead a team to win. Because of the way this map is designed, because of its less linear, more circular design, it's much more about simply who has the most flags, who plays the game better, who splits up their team, avoids the Zerg and doesn't Zerg themselves. And as such, the previous mentioned strategy of focusing more on keeping your dummy flag, taking their dummy flag, and holding the flanking objectives, those of course being B and D, is essentially as far as strategy goes on this map. Going for C where appropriate, knowing when to attack what objective is really what matters most on this map. Using your tanks effectively will obviously help you massively. Making use of your transport vehicles to avoid getting spawn trapped, another very important step. Just generally having good players that know how to play cover, how to avoid Zergs, how to take objectives and play objectives, however, is the most important part by far on this map, and not attacking a certain objective necessarily. When it comes actually to opening strategies, you could say there is one, and that is essentially to take your dummy flags, then take the flanking flags B and D, and then close in onto C, essentially with a pincer movement. That will put you off to a fantastic start for a round. If you're looking for strategy at the start of the round, that's probably the best way to do it, because that way you will start the round off probably with 4 flags, minimum with 3, giving you an early lead already in the game, motivating your team to stay on top, motivating your team to keep hold of those flags. If you can get a spawn trap, as previously mentioned, that is possible on this map and is obviously a great way to turn around a game that you were losing if it's possible, or to seal the deal if you're already close to winning. Other than that, just play the game like it's meant to be, objective focused, team focused, and you'll generally win the round. Now, I'd love to hear your opinions on this map guide, as well as, of course, your experiences with Prise de Tahure. Once more, I apologize for my French. Leave them down below in the comments or hit me up with them on Twitter, as well as, of course, with your usual video suggestions. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And with that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.